Welcome to NeuroMovement Revolution with Anat, Baniel, where you will discover breakthrough possibilities for your life through the brain's power to change. We're so happy that you can join us in making the impossible possible.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us once more for our NeuroMovement Revolution podcast. This is episode 13 already, and the topic for this first part of our morning session this morning is enthusiasm, the fifth essential for positive brain change. So, Anat.
Hi, good morning. Nice to have you here. Nice to have everyone that's on the call live. And also I want to welcome if anybody is a first timer. I want to give you a heads up. My voice is a little weird and I might cough from time to time, but my doctor told me yesterday I'm going to live and be fine soon. So it's all good.
Good.
Oh, and I'm not contagious. Since
Good,
I'm
very good.
So close to you. Yes. Past that stage. All right?
Yes.
Okay, so Neil, maybe we'll mix something up here a little bit and say, what would you want to tell people or say right away about enthusiasm before I talk about it?
Well, I mean, enthusiasm is a word that's used a lot, just every day by everybody. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. And I mean, particularly with children, you know, people get very enthusiastic when a child does something new and they feel, you know, it's great, the child gets positive reinforcement, you know, and it's actually become very much what I hear with the parents that come to see us. It's very much a part of like education and child development, that this is a sort of necessity. And, you know, in our world, we are very enthusiastic about the children and we're incredibly enthusiastic about their progress, but we do have a different way of sort of fashioning it and expressing it. And we coach the parents a lot about not just like cheering and like sort of trying to get the child to do more and more, but having this sort of this very internal sense of joy and really being thrilled at the smallest change you may see in your child and realizing how wonderful and amazing that is, but not jumping up and down and sort of shouting.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I 100%, and I would like to remind, like with each of the essentials, that the job of the essentials or the purpose of the essentials is to create conditions where the brain can do its job better. So if and when the brain works more effectively as it is structured to work, then what the child can learn, what the kind of possibilities that open up are of a whole other world, other order of magnitude than compared to when the brain is working on a lesser level of capability or potential. And when a child has special needs, there is something going on. It can be metabolic, it can be, you know, stroke at birth or genetic condition, structural deformity, anything that, so to speak, derails the brain from its spontaneous ability to do its job and bump from level to level to level to level of skills. And the thing that the job of the brain is to put order in the disorder and make sense out of the nonsense. And we talked about it in previous, of course, podcast. And the brain is an information system. It's really important to come back to that. It's not a mechanical system. It doesn't work the way we're used to. So more intensity and more power and more repetitions and so on will definitely impact the brain. It's just that it could be counterproductive big way. And even if it's not detrimental, it does not enhance the possibilities that are there. And as an information system, really the basis of what the provides information to the brain is through the perception of differences in the stimuli, the ongoing flow of stimulation that comes in us and through us, right? In the internal and from the outside and so on. So enthusiasm is the way, and I'll talk about it right away in a minute, is a way to amplify, make it easier for the brain to perceive differences. So in the past, we spoke about reducing force, for example, or intensity of stimulation, because as the stimulation gets more intense, the brain desensitizes proportionally to the, it needs more stimulation to perceive a difference. So if I hold a paper on my hand and you put the pencil on top of it, and I'm not looking at it, I would probably feel the change in weight. But if I'm holding a 3-pound book and I'm not looking and you put gently a pencil, I would not feel the difference. It's not because I'm not a sensitive person. It's because the brain is not built to feel with the intensity of holding and the intensity of the muscles working. The addition of the weight of, I don't know, 1 ounce or 2 ounces of a pencil will not be felt. Now, we can develop ourselves to be more sensitive, but there is always a threshold where we will not perceive a difference. So enthusiasm, think of it, I'll tell you maybe first how I came to it. So I noticed working on a specific child that when one of the parents was in the room, she changed, she learned really quickly. And when the other parent was in the room, she seemed more like wet cement. It was like sticky. She didn't respond and change and blossom as quickly and as much. And what I observed over time, both parents, wonderful people, both parents completely committed and dedicated to the child. And what I observed is that the parent where it worked easily was attuned to the slightest of changes that the child was doing, or the changes in the child. So if she could move her arm a little easier, or if she made a new kind of sound or something, he was just filled with delight and hope. He was very quiet. Actually, he was a very quiet person. But I could observe that, and then if we talked later, I mean, it made him feel really, really well. The other parent was emotional. It was very, for both parents, all parents, it's always very shocking. But when I pointed to her that it changes, when I would go like, oh, look, now she can do this, or this is different, or it was like small changes, not like, oh, my child can walk now, or my child is talking, or my child's getting straight in math. In the beginning, the brain, the changes are just around where the child is. So for her, it was actually depressing. She would get depressed. It was like killing off hope. And what I did with it is I suggested that the parent that had, of course I said he and she, so the dad, that he'd bring the child for a while and just get her going further. And when the child was able to do more, then also the mother started doing what I call enthusiasm. And then I started observing it elsewhere, that when the parents or caretakers or sometimes PTs or whoever were sitting in the room and they were attuned and they took that internal sense of well-being, they observed it, they noticed it, and quietly, emotionally, they amplified it basically. They made it big, they made it meaningful, but not like Neil said, by clapping or saying, oh, good boy or good girl, which is the worst thing to do because it has nothing to do with them being good or bad. But it just was like a genuine, oh my God, These eyes didn't turn to the right before, and now the eyes are turning to the right. This is remarkable. So that, things just seem to cascade a lot, positive changes a lot faster. And when there was like either just being oblivious to it and just being focused on, oh, but he's not doing this, and will he stand, and will she talk, and the doctor said that, then children still change, but it's not with the same amplitude. So enthusiasm, you can think, some people say the origin of enthusiasm is like from the gods or of the gods. For me, and it's not a religious use of the word God, but it's the aspect of the miraculous. So when I work with a child, and let's say the child had torticollis or whatever the condition, and the eyes don't move to the right, they only move to the left. And the head primarily moves to the left. And we do what we do, and the eyes start going past the midline. And the head, and also the child start perceiving there's a universe on this part of themselves. For me, it's a miracle. I know what I did. I know what's happening with the child. We know their brains and bodies, and they move. It's still miraculous. So there's a deep, when we, the practitioners, work, we notice it and we join in and continue dealing with it and making it, be part of more of what the child is doing. However, for the parents or caretakers, the ability to notice quietly, internally, and expand yourself, have a sense of it, not excitement, not clapping hands, but which, by the way, when a child does something new and you clap or you get really loud or you point it out, you can create inhibition in the brain that makes it so it actually disappears and it's very hard to recreate it. And it's also irrelevant. Your excitement is not relevant to the child's actions. It's the child's sensing and feeling and them being interested in what they do that is important. But we as observers, as outsiders, we can observe it. And we can even say, oh, the toy is over here. Or, you can say something about the situation. But it's the internal amplification and the developing ability to observe and to appreciate what is going on and when there are changes in learning, even if it's not what we're hoping will happen today. I'm going to cough. Just a second. Excuse me. So another way of thinking is you internally actively amplify what you observe. You make it internally meaningful, important, miraculous. It's a form of generosity of spirit. And it's very powerful. And there's now actually scientific research that shows that our emotions, we can not touch, not talk, but be like sitting across, impact powerfully what happens in the brain of the person you're with. And the brain has to select what it says, good thing, I'm going to adopt it. It's a good, let's just make it simple, it's a good thing, or it's not a good thing. And the good things get grooved in much more readily than the things that the brain judges either is irrelevant or negative or whatever. So I think maybe anything that, or shall we open it for questions or comments?
Well, I just want to piggyback off something you said. I'm coughing now too.
Thank you for this.
Okay. We've talked before about how the child's brain and the parent's brain are one system. And I'm so struck when, I saw it this week. I was working with a little boy who basically laid down on the table for the first time.
How old then?
And he's 3 years old. And he never lay down comfortably, ever. And you could tell, he was just transfixed. He was incredibly internally focused. And, anytime a child does something that they recognize as being something different, they get into that state. They're fascinated.
And they're perceiving differences.
They're perceiving differences. Their little brain is going.
1.8 million new connections per
second
second on the average.
And it's happened. On this particular occasion, the parents were like, had already been really well trained. They'd only been there for like 4 days, and they were just like sitting there holding their breath almost, because they were beside themselves with joy. But sometimes it can just be that the parent shifts their weight in the chair, and the kid suddenly like is distracted out of that moment because they're just so in tune with the parent. So, it's so powerful when you see that happen to realize, no, just let that child have that really rich, incredible experience, because that's when they're figuring things out. That's when like sort of thinking and cognition is forming in front of your eyes and in them. But it's not a verbal thing. It's not words. It's this intense internal experience.
It's not an interpersonal, it's not engagement, active engagement with another human being. It's there.
Deeply personal.
It's deeply personal. It's up to their brain to do it. You can't encourage their brain to do, because if you encourage them or you clap, you're actually giving them a separate task. And you're snapping, very often when children in school, they sit and the teacher teaches something new, and all of a sudden the child sort of goes into daydreaming, right? They just stare in space. Very often teachers feel like they're not listening. That's true. But that's a moment where they're doing something internal. Now, sometimes a child will actively daydream and not listen altogether. Then, of course, they're not hearing and so on, and something needs to be done with it. But this ebb and flow of external, internal, and just respecting that they're having their own experience. You're still there, and your enthusiasm is very impactful. So how about we open it to questions or comments? Do we have anything?
Absolutely. So the one comment that we have is from Nedi Safar, who says, good differentiation between cheerleading and enthusiasm.
Which I remember we did a few days presentations and work with the staff, PTs, OTs, and so on, in a wonderful center somewhere in the United States. And they were very, 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 that works primarily with autistic kids. And they were very into prompting and clapping and cheering. And first what we did with them is a little observation. And I was like, wow, because it's like, where is the child? And they were so loving. They were so committed to those kids. And so then I knew what we needed to do. And we started doing and talking the essentials and doing some movement stuff with them and so on. And then it was a small team, and we talked to them, and they were very open about it. They said, this is really difficult because we intentionally cheerlead them all the time. And then, of course, I did some demonstrations, and they saw the changes, remember, in the children. And it was hard for them because they depended on cheerleading to feel that they are contributing something. So that just reminded me that, yeah.
We have an expression of enthusiasm from Maggie, who we met in Germany when we were there teaching a workshop. She says, hello all together, dear Anat. Now I have a private English teacher to improve my English. And she puts an exclamation point. So she's gearing up to do our next training program.
Oh my God, so good. We'd love to see you there.
Regarding questions, the one question we have is, how do you combat anxiety when you're trying to recover from a stroke?
Okay, that is an amazing question, and I assume this is an adult, right? Lynn?
Lynn. Yes,
Yeah.
This is from Lynn Fogarty. So if you could follow up and give us a little more information, Lynn, while I'm not speaking.
Yeah, so like, when was the stroke and what can you or can't you do? Are you the one typing the question? So I know a little bit more. Yes, so maybe until she tells us more. Is there anything else?
We have no questions like live at the moment.
Okay,
so I'm going to look for. Maybe you keep talking about something.
Oh, okay. Keep talking about something. Yeah, I'm so ready to interact with you guys. So I'm just sitting and waiting here. Just read a question. We have a ton of questions that you guys sent in.
Okay, well, the first one that comes to my, what are some specific ways we can apply the 9 essentials to assist a non-verbal child with ASD or developmental delay?
Well,
can we help them become verbal without trying to fix them?
What I hear in this question is that when you have an ASD child that's nonverbal, you obviously would like them to be able to speak for this ability to do that and communicate, and also what it will signify. It's important to back off from using the essentials with the intention of the hope that it will bring in the ability to speak. What you're using the essentials for is to facilitate for the brain to be better at perceiving differences. And that is true for anybody in any condition. For children on the autism spectrum, this is like the issue. The brain's ability to perceive differences, certainly in certain areas, is compromised. So you do it everywhere that an opportunity, or at least some of the time, where the opportunity shows up. So you can do it around feeding. You can do it around like this thing versus that thing, or about more or less, or about faster or slower, about anywhere in terms of the movement, in terms of, is it over here? Is it over there? You can still talk. And then if you want to marginally touch the whole question of speaking, think of language rather than speaking. Think of communication. So you, and probably your child is already doing some of that, maybe very little. Sometimes children on the spectrum are pretty extreme and they just sort of like don't respond to anything that we would expect them to, including their name. Look for opportunities to, even if you put something in front of the face and you name it, or you say this, that, I mean, you look to create opportunities that the world is becoming a series of thing one versus thing two, or this versus that, really a world of noticing that this is this and this is that. Anything is in the right direction. And of course, if you have the ability to go to a practitioner that can work directly with the child and do more direct stuff around the differentiation in the body and so on, that would be helpful. But I hope that helps you and helps everybody, because it's always the same. Around where the child is, what is occurring with the child, there you're looking to introduce, either through slow subtlety, movement with attention to the feeling of self. You create variation, and you generate enthusiasm the way we talked about. You say, oh my God, look, this is this and this is that, this kind of stuff.
So Lynn followed up. She says it's 8 years since the stroke. She can type. She has a left-sided stroke. Her speech is perfect.
Okay. All right. And can she walk? And look at I mean,
there's another couple of questions that come in. Yes. So maybe I'll give you those, and then there are two about neurodegenerative conditions, one in child and one an adult. The first one from Sulasni, how to keep the enthusiasm while a child is diagnosed with a rare degenerative disease.
That's huge.
And then Herta, thank you so much for the work you do. I have multiple sclerosis and the exercises help me greatly. I have a question about enthusiasm and neurodegenerative diseases. How would you advise handling regression due to flare-ups? How to keep up and best use the power of enthusiasm in these cases? Having a little trouble with walking, it's difficult for me to walk slowly using the essential slow. Will there be a program on walking? The program for better balance is helpful, but I can only do about half the lessons at this point.
Okay, so there's a nice sequence of things there. First of all, if if to keep balance, walking slow is hard for you, don't do slow in walking. I mean, you always work with what is available at this time. It's not about doing everything slow in life. It's about slowing down when you want to learn or figure something out. And we have very little time left here. So I want to tackle, first of all, I'm going to say a very general thing. Anxiety is associated, first of all, it can be very, biochemical in the body, and sometimes there's things that certain foods cause anxiety and so on. So you can observe that. But I'm going to talk about it from the direction of the sense of safety. And anxiety is associated with the feeling of danger. And the main way I know to help reduce anxiety is to create more skill, like literally feeling safer in the movement and so on. So I don't know if you've been doing our work or what you can do, but I know to do our work, our work is that as you get more mobile, also the breathing gets better, the oxygen, stuff gets better. That could reduce anxiety, could improve sleep. And there's certain things that scare us, and having a stroke is the most scary thing ever. It's like you are one person one moment and you're another one. I'll take the time. So if that's not enough, the next one is all about questions. So bring your questions to, in a few minutes, we'll go back. And how do you keep enthusiasm? This is like a huge, huge deal. I have worked with a number of children that were known that their lifespan is going to be very short. And I had to do some of this work too. And it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard. That means we're not trained. We're not evolved to that place of enlightenment where we live second by second, right, by our experience, and we infuse that with, the enthusiasm, the awareness, the well-being, the wonder. But if I'm going to take, first of all, the child, I don't have time to get the stories, but the child can be helped, and I know that from the work, to feel better, to get more movement, to be able to express themselves more. And they are having a better life. And that is where the focus is. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't sadness. Enthusiasm is not about not feeling sadness at times, or having fear sometimes, or being angry at times. Enthusiasm is about being able to generate. It's something we do where we choose to be delighted, to be grateful, to be enthusiastic about what's going on. I just tell you, it's kind of silly, but when I wanted to train myself to do enthusiasm better, in my work, it wasn't that hard for me. I kind of spontaneously did it from the beginning. It always occurred to me as miraculous. But in my life, I'm not so great. So I needed to train myself a bit. So I'd go to the supermarket and I'd beat the checkout line, and I'd look at the person that's doing it and say, what can I get enthusiastic about this person? It could be the buckle of their belt. It could be the speed at which they do it. I found something, I zeroed in, and I'd go into situations, and I can be such a complainer. I'm so good at it. And I would go and say, instead of complaining, find enthusiasm. For you that have multiple sclerosis and you feel the help, and there are regressions. First of all, notice if the regressions are associated when you exhaust yourself a bit too much or you push yourself too much. Because if you do, maybe back off. But there is the regression as part of the condition. Well, you can first of all, feel the fear or the pissed off, or, it's hard. It is hard. But then maybe remember how you did just before that, and that you had regression before. And then just give yourself space. Don't push it, and start doing just 5 minutes at a time, 6 minutes at a time of our work to get yourself coming back. And just become really good at it, because I want to get better at it. If there's one thing in my life I want to improve, is what I talk about, the enthusiasm beyond my own work. Because when I work with you, I just have it. I just do it. But to be available to do it, to be genuinely, which means you don't deny the other parts. You feel them, but you see when you can gently coochie-coo yourself out of it into enthusiasm. Thank you guys for listening. And thank you those of you that will be listening to it later. And
so yes, we're drawing this part of this morning's podcast to a close, but the next episode will actually continue where we left off from this one. So we will carry on with some of the questions that are still waiting here, and we'll move on to answering questions on the other essentials that we've previously covered.
Yeah, so anybody that wants to bring questions in any direction about this essential, of course, and the previous 4, we'd love to meet you around the corner.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on NeuroMovement Revolution with Anat Baniel. You will find all of our podcasts and additional resources on our website at www.anatbanielmethod.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast for free on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn. We look forward to seeing you online for our next NeuroMovement Revolution.